wanted to be an artist?
Well, I mean, the idea didn't occur to me immediately as a child. No, I mean, I was at school and I enjoyed drawing and painting, but I didn't think I'll be an artist.
Was your home city Liverpool an interesting place to paint or draw?
Well, it wasn't really. When I got interested in drawing and painting in my teens, I remember thinking I'll do a painting from my house. And I looked out of the window. I lived on a council estate in Liverpool, and the houses opposite were all red brick, all uniform. And I did a painting of it, but it didn't look very interesting. And I thought to myself, well, it'd be nice to live in a place which immediately looked more interesting. The central Liverpool was very interesting, and that's where I went to school, but I didn't actually do much work down there when I was a boy.
Who was your biggest inspiration as an artist?
Well, it's very difficult that because it's just you know, one's ideas come from a million sources, but one of the biggest influences on me, I suppose, and one of my teachers I remember most was a man called Martin Bloch, who taught at Camberwell when I was a student at Camberwell College of Art. He was a German emigre from Europe because he got out in the early 30s. He was a Jew, and Hitler was beginning to persecute the Jews in Germany, and he wisely got out in time and came to live in England, and got a job eventually. He was a painter, and he got a job at Camberwell School of Art.
In 1957, after art college, why did you go into teaching?
Well, that was the thing at the time. I remember discussing this with my fellow students. In those days, most of us didn't think we could make it as a painter immediately from art school, so we had to find some way to make a living. And I don't know I can't think of one at that time who wanted to, many of us wanted to paint, but we thought we've got to earn our living. So I went, in fact, to London University and did a teaching course there. So I started teaching art in a school.
What's your favourite colour?
Well, I haven't got a favourite colour, really. I've thought about this before. I mean, a lot of my paintings are rather blue because I paint landscapes, and the landscape around here with the sea and the sky, it tends to be rather cool. But although there are a lot of blue in paintings, I like all colours and the correlation between colours. And one reason I paint the fish market, which I'm painting now, is because it has all the primary and secondary colours in it, and it's very rich, really, in a sort of technical sense. It's very rich in colour, and the interplay between the colours fascinated me. I remember when I was at school, at grammar school, the teacher said to me, do a design, just a design, based on primary and secondary colours and interrelate them. And I remember to this day doing that, really enjoying it. You know, the secondary colours, orange and purple, for instance. I did a design with those, and then ones with primaries. It was really interesting.
How do you spend your typical day as an artist?
My typical day is I get up and do some work in the studio. I might do a bit of framing, a bit of preparation for paintings. Sometimes I go out and draw. To do paintings of the fish market, I either go down to the fish market and take photographs in the early morning. You have to get up early to operate in the fish market because it starts at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I've done many drawings and quick sketches, oil sketches down there. And then I come back in the studio, do a little bit of preparation, and then start the paintings. But that's not a typical day. Ordinarily, I just come in the studio, make a frame, and then do some painting, which I've got the source material for.
When did you retire?
I haven't retired. I don't really. I mean, people often say that. When did you retire? I stopped teaching when I was about 47, and I came down here and started a painting school for when I'd finished working as a lecturer, so I haven't retired. I still paint every day. I do some painting, I must say. I really do some painting most days.
What types of art do you like?
Well, I'm involved in painting all my life. I like painting and drawing most, and these days many of the galleries are filled with installations, performance artists or performances as conceptual art, and to me it's almost alien. I've looked at it carefully and thought about it, but for me I prefer to paint. It's what I'm used to and it's what I like, and personally I think it's more relevant to the average man's experience painting than say performance art.
Why did you move to Cornwall?
Well, as I said before, when I was 47 I stopped, I was a lecturer at the college where I worked, trained teachers, and the demographers, I think that's the right word, decided they were training too many teachers at that time. This is in about 77, yes, but 75 there. And a lot of the training colleges throughout the country which trained teachers closed, and I was the head of the department at one near Nottingham, and that closed like many of the other colleges around the country. Although we had a very good academic record at the college, and there was a lot of resentment at the college at the time because this had happened. And you know, the lecturers, there were 55 lecturers there, and we had to find something else to do, and I decided I wanted to carry on painting, and so I came to live in Cornwall. I thought Cornwall was a more interesting place to paint in than Nottingham, because Nottingham was it's right in the centre of the country. It's rather flat around Nottingham where we lived, and I thought it'd be more interesting to come and live. We went on our holidays regularly, but they found me to Cornwall and to Wales, and I thought, well, why not live there and paint the scenery which surrounds me? And so that's one reason I came to Cornwall.
How many paintings have you sold?
Well, I hadn't really, I don't think about it. I've sold a lot of paintings obviously over the years, so over those many years I've painted, I've done lots of paintings, and they're certainly not all here now. I don't know, somebody did a calculation recently that I must have painted about 750 or more paintings, and of those 750 I must have sold well over half of them, perhaps 500. But I mean, it's very difficult to be precise about these things. I didn't make very good records early on when I was selling paintings. I just sold them.
What do you consider your artistic style?
I used to think once that everybody else had a style except me. I just painted, and I think there's something in that now. I think that's true really, and people are often categorised for the sake of art critics and commentators often describe painters as working in a certain style, like expressionist or impressionist. Realistic, figurative is another word which is used. What on earth quite that means, I don't know. Representational is another word. Abstract is another word, and these are words invented by critics. The word abstract, we didn't use that phrase 100 and well, perhaps 200 years ago. And these words arise, and there's an enormous number of categorisations of art. Critics don't seem to be able to wait to categorise people into performance artists, installation artists, sound artists, land artists. I mean, it gets very confusing. So I'd rather not use the word style. I paint.
Why do you like painting Newlyn Fish Market?
As I mentioned before, I mean, the colours really interested me down there, and I like the idea of a place having meaning. I think a lot of the places in Cornwall these days are based on tourism. You know, the big thing in Cornwall is tourism, apart from agriculture over the centuries. But around the coast of Cornwall there are fishing ports, and this is easily the biggest one in Cornwall. And it's got a meaning apart from just tourism. It's a nice place to live, as I know, chose to live here. But at the heart of it is a fish market, and it's not in the heart of Newquay. It's basically a sort of hotel, you might say, although there's a little bit of fishing done there. But in Cornwall, the main meaning for the existence of Newlyn is fishing, and so that's why I'm really happy to. Almost by chance, I came here. I didn't know it was a fishing port when I first came to live here, but it's very true. The heart of Newlyn is the fishing port, so that's why the fish market's interesting, and that the harbour itself, which is fascinating, is the biggest harbour in Cornwall.
Why have you done so many paintings of London?
Started doing a series of paintings and got an exhibition in a gallery, the Connaught Brown Gallery, of those paintings, which went quite well. And so I did a whole series of paintings of London, based on, many of them were from high buildings, not all of them, some were from ground level, but it was a wonderful thing to do. I really enjoyed it, and it reminded me also, it took me back to my student days. I mean, I was a student in London when the Festival of Britain took place in 1951, and I remember the festival site being built and developed, and I painted that site later on from high buildings near there.
Why do you think so many artists moved to Cornwall?
Well, it's part of a movement. I mean, if you know a little bit about the history of art and the way artists work in one place or another, it so happens there was a migration of artists from the big cities to the coasts or to the countryside. In many countries throughout Europe, it happened in Scotland, and it happened in Glasgow, in London. The artists from Glasgow and Edinburgh went to live on the coasts of places like Oban. And in Denmark and Sweden there were movements. There's several books been written about this, the movement of artists outside, moving out in the big cities to look for, I don't know, a simpler, more straightforward, less complicated life. And in the case of Brittany, for instance, is very famous for artists living there. Artists like Bastien Lepage and de Gauguin, and even Van Gogh went to Brittany and painted life there. And the counterpart of that in Cornwall is Newlyn, really, because artists started settling in Newlyn in late Victorian times, and moving away from the city, from Birmingham and from London, and they painted the fishermen and the life of fishermen, and eventually also the countryside, the agriculture around here. And it became quite a centre for artists around here.
Which other contemporary artists' work do you like?
Depends what you mean by contemporary. You know, I like many of the artists in the middle of the 19th century, but artists these days, some of my friends, I like their work. I like the work of Roy Ray and Phil Whiting and Roy Walker, who's sadly died. But I like their work a lot, and they're not representational painters necessarily, like me. They're abstract artists in several of the cases I've just mentioned, but I like their work, yes.
Someone said J.D. Mackenzie from Newlyn Copper fame had a workshop here. Can you explain?
Well, I bought this house here not knowing much about the history of the house, but when I got the title deeds I discovered that the original resident of this house, which I think he leased it, but the original resident of this house was a man called J.D. Mackenzie, or John Mackenzie, and he came here as an artist in about 1879, I think it was, shortly after the house was built. And like many other artists who settled in Newlyn at the time, he came down as a painter, but pretty swiftly I mean, the most famous one down here is Stanley Forbes, who used to live just over the hill there, but J.D. Mackenzie decided to do Newlyn copper. It was fashionable in Victorian times to do repoussé copper. There's a couple of his plates on the wall there, and they often have traditional designs on, but eventually they took on Art Nouveau designs, which are very, very collectible. You'll see them in all the auction rooms these days. And he had a big studio in the garden here, and eventually he founded what was called the Newlyn Industrial School, and employed and trained lots of local boys in this copper repoussé work. And so it became quite famous, quite a good sideline for Newlyn to have this copper repoussé. Newlyn copper, it's called.
Also, didn't Fred Hall used to live around here?
That's right. Well, after J.D. Mackenzie left, Fred Hall came to live here. That's true. He's one of the Newlyn school. He was a friend of Stanley Forbes and all the other painters, and he was quite a good caricaturist too. He did some nice drawings, caricature drawings of the Newlyn artists.
How can people see your artwork?
Well, obviously they come to my studio. Anybody welcome to come to the studio. And just give me a ring and come in and have a look. But I do exhibit in galleries. I'm a member of Newlyn Society of Artists, and I've exhibited with them for many years, and I exhibit in other galleries around the county, the gallery at Trelsick Gardens, for instance, and the Westcott Gallery in St Ives. And there's many of my paintings on my website, bernardevans.co.uk.